Hey everybody, welcome to another PHILREEDSHIKES video. First thing I want to point out to you here is that the turnoff roads off of Highway 12 heading from Escalante, there is no sign into the airfield, so be careful when looking at your map. We're going to do a flyover. It's the best way that I can think of for you to see the terrain. Here we are approaching our first night's camp at Sand Creek. There was great water flowing. One of the things to be aware of when you're not walking on the slick rock is that the trails are 100% sand, like walking on a beach, so just be prepared for that walking. Here's our flyover of Death Hollow. It was pretty spectacular hiking in, hiking along the water, and hiking back out. One of the unknowns was how much water to carry to Mamie's Creek. Most of us carried between 4 and 6 liters. Once we got to Mamie's Creek, we found out it wasn't necessary because there were many potholes, and I mean incredibly large potholes full of water. So we filtered some water, we drank a lot of water, and we tanked up. And as we hiked to the trailhead, we passed 2 gullies that also had potholes with water. I think I only carried 2 liters on this stretch, and I only used 1 liter. The low temps were about 30 degrees, and that was about 5 to 6 o'clock in the morning. The highs were around 75, 80 degrees, mainly in the low 70s, upper 60s. The trail is very well marked with rock cairns, and anytime you're not walking on the slick rock, it is sandy. The terrain from the airfield was pretty spectacular, and it only took us about an hour and a half to get to Sand Creek. Once we got to Sand Creek, we followed a little social trail up to a bench that was flat right above the trail. As you can see, it was pretty large. Some people wanted private campsites. Myself and another gentleman cowboy camped out in the open. It was perfect for viewing the stars at night. I took a couple of photographs of the stream running along the base of the rock wall. Sand Creek had some potholes. So after we pitched our tents, Bones and I took a little recon hike down to the intersection with Sand Creek. We came across this little fella. Actually, it wasn't a little fellow, it was pretty large. I have no idea what kind of snake it is. There's one of the potholes on Sand Creek. There's the original stream where it connects with Sand Creek. The only thing about cowboy camping, sand was everywhere and you couldn't avoid it. Any type of slight breeze caused sand to cover all your stuff. Took these at about 2 o'clock in the morning. Just set my camera, pointed it up, set it on my pack, and just let it fire automatically. It was about 35 degrees in the morning until the sun came over the ridge and warmed things up. Sun's getting ready to come up. And off we go. Walking on the slick rock was a lot of fun at first, but as the day warmed up, we found a little phenomenon where the heat would just bounce back up from the rock and radiate in your face. And then we went from the rock to those sand trails, and the sand trails, like I said, was just like walking on a beach. I kept thinking I was in SEALs training or something in North Carolina. And another steep up. It was up, then down, then up. The terrain was much more varied than I had gleaned from the map originally. The cairns were perfect. It matched the GPS track exactly throughout the entire hike. Our first glimpse of Death Hollow. or at least the descent starting to Death Hollow. And yes, the cairns led over the top of almost every one of these. There we are. Our trail kind of goes down and winds around to the right. And what goes down must come up. Beautiful vista of the trees down in Death Hollow. This is the start of the little tricky section at the top, winding way over the steep section. But it was a lot wider than most photographers make it look. There is a sandy path that follows the river, and the reports of poison ivy are pretty true. There was poison ivy almost the entire path, and you could avoid it by walking in the creek, but walking in the creek is what everybody wants to do anyway and get some nice photographs. Plus it was incredibly refreshing. But as with most streams up in the mountains, it was blocked several times by rocks and downfalls, so you were forced to get up on the path and negotiate short stretches of poison ivy. Nobody wanted to stop and put on their long pants, so you had to be very careful negotiating the poison ivy.
Flounder for a bit. Make him really appreciate
A little lunch break before we loaded up with water and started the ascent out of the hollow. The ascent was a lot better in that there were no sharp drop-offs, but it was straight up and continuous. And the section dropping down into the river was indeed steep, and you had to watch where you're going. Yet we met 4 fellas on horseback and mules that were headed down the same path we came down, and we didn't get an opportunity to see how they negotiated it. You know, whatever mileage times the guidebooks say, you probably need to double it if you're going to stop and take photographs. Plus, when you're backpacking, you don't really need to rush. It's too pretty to rush through. Alright, here we are on the ascent out of the hollow. Good photo of Sandman all the way up. Panning across Death Hollow from our vantage point. There's Cowboy. And Hot Sauce following Sandman. Hot Sauce was carrying about 2 gallons of water, so her pack was pretty heavy. Great photos of the climb coming out. There are the fellas on horseback. About that time we wished we were riding horses. Looking back down. Okay, now we've finally reached the top. We're going across a sandy bench. And again, it was sandy. It's kind of hard to walk, and so you just have to go slow and steady. Here we go. Here's our descent down into Mamie's Creek. You see the giant pothole right there. And across the pothole, across into the shade, that's where we wound up camping. What I didn't film was the descent coming down. It was extremely steep. There we go. Looking back up, you can't tell how steep it was, but there were 2 dangerous sections that I had to slide on my butt. Pothole was really big, and there was quite a few of them. Taking a break after we got there. We took a break for about an hour, and then we decided to go see the arch. The hard part is trying to find the trail among the social trails. And just FYI, the primary trail is on the opposite bank from where we're camping, or on the east side of the creek. Hot Sauce decided to take a break and let us walk on the rest of the way. There's Mamie's Creek, and there's our first glimpse of the arch, aka a hole in the rock. There was no water flowing in it. Most of the videos I had seen had shown a really healthy flow of water, but not this year or this time. A small little ledge going above a steep drop off into a dry well. There was a bypass on the side where I'm taking photographs, but a couple of our rock climbing buddies thought it wasn't an issue. There we are, headed out the next day. More potholes in this first little ravine. It's well defined on the map. There were 2 small ravines with creeks that were dry, but each one had potholes. It was a pleasant walk, this third and last section, down to where the B&T links in with the western end of the Escalante River trailhead. Another good sized pothole in the ravine, and then back up the slick rock. It rained that night, so we were really glad that it didn't rain while we were up there. You needed good dry traction to make it up the rock. So it would have been a bear if it had been wet. Good panoramic view of the valley above and right next to the town of Escalante. Really a fantastic view, and those are the upper staircases of the Grande Staircase Escalante. at the top on the horizon, right there. Or so our shuttle driver told us. We left our car at the trailhead down at the bottom here, and then had a shuttle take us around to the airfield. Looking back up, again, many cairns, just go from cairn to cairn to cairn. Taking a small break. Yours truly. Now we're down at the bottom and walking on the sand path, following the dry creek bed. Well, it was dry in sections and flowing pretty good in other sections. There's the Escalante River Trailhead sign. You'd think there'd be a Boulder Mill Trail sign on this end too, but there wasn't. Yet it wasn't over. We still had to walk about 1.5 miles to get to the car. Now in this section, we're driving around to the river trailhead, just south of Boulder. Fantastic road. I think they called it the Devil's Backbone. We stopped at a couple of overlooks and took photographs. There's one gnarly section where the road drops on either side of the highway, straight down. And our first glimpse of the Escalante River trailhead that right at the intersection with Highway 12 outside the town of Boulder. Find a place to park and take some photos, and we're ready to take off. Now our shuttle driver was telling us that this is a great backpacking section. It's 15 miles along the Escalante River here, and it'd be a great 3-day, 2-night backpacking trip. The only downside, again, is the trail is all sand and it's hard to walk on. So you have your choice of the sand trail or the river. The river's very nice, but after you've been walking it for 45 minutes or so, your legs can get really you can start to feel them. Yeah, this is all in the canyon of the Escalante. It gets really wide, then it gets narrow, then it gets super wide again up here at this end. The trail kind of loops out a valley, then makes a sharp turn directly towards the rock wall, so you get a dramatic vista of your first view of the first arch. Time to get back on the trail. Alright, there's the arch from the trail coming around. You get up here, you take about 100 photographs of the arch. We had it in good light. I'm not going to show you all 100 photographs. You have to take a lot of photographs to get a couple of good ones. So now we're headed on down river to find the next arch. The map saying one is a natural bridge and one is a natural arch. I couldn't tell you which is which. There was the next one. Is that a bridge or an arch? One of the mistakes I made was letting us camp too close to the trailhead, because when we got back to camp we had plenty of time on our hands, and we said, hey, why don't we just run back to the car and run into Escalante and get some beer and pizza. And that's exactly what we did. And then after we had lots of beer and lots of pizza, we drove on back and then hiked on to the back to the camp. One thing I got to tell you here is that if you have a non-self-supporting tent like a tarp tent brand, like a Notch or a Z-Pax tent, where you have to have your tent poles, you can't use the little pegs. Now here's Bryce Canyon National Park, on our way back to trying to get back to the interstate from Escalante. It goes right through the park. We stopped at the overlook, took some photos. You can't use the normal spike type tent pegs. You have to use something that's broad, more like a snow peg, V-shaped, flat, to hold the sand. Our tents kept blowing over when we were just using the little spikes that come with the tent, or you trade them out for titanium. But I had to break off some sticks about a foot long and jam them into this sand to have any chance of keeping my tent up. You'd have to bring some really long tent stakes. Escalante Visitor Center, and there we are at the trailhead, and some additional photos. There's yours truly in Bones. This is our first camp. Again at Sand Creek. There's some extra photos at the end here. Some vistas by Cowboy. Some panoramas. And our descent down into Death Hollow. And carrying my water shoes. We didn't have any bugs, so that was nice. Needed lots of sunscreen. There we are back at Mamie's Creek Arch. There were some holes in there that looked to be 20-30 feet deep without water, so if somebody was goofing around, fell in one of those holes, we'd be hard pressed to get him out. Morning panorama of the BMT between Mamie's Creek and the trailhead, the western end trailhead on the Escalante side. And now we're back on the Escalante River on our way to the arches. We forgot to get any photos of our campsite. Alright, and this just about does it. Hope you enjoyed it.